Hello, I'm Jo Perrott. I'm the founder of the Ladies Working Dog Group. I hope you are enjoying our podcast. This week we're talking all about working dogs and families. I'm happy to be joined tonight by...
Hi, my name's Jemma Martin. I'm one half of Whistle and Wag Dog Training based in Suffolk.
Hi, I'm Claire Denyer from Family Dog Services based in Maidstone in Kent.
Hi, I'm Samantha Thorneycroft-Taylor of Languedoc Gun Dogs in Gloucestershire.
Hi, I'm Emma. I run Cunning Shot Dog Training based in Leicestershire in the East Midlands.
So, leading on from last week's podcast on cues and commands, this week we are going to be talking about combining working dogs and families. Now, obviously, when you have a family or partners or even mum and dads or people walking your dogs, you have other people involved in the training. This can cause issues, as we know. So let's start talking about this then, ladies. Where do you think, obviously when it's one person training a dog, it can be difficult enough. What happens when we start involving a family, like a partner? Where do the difficulties start with that?
I think when you involve let's just say just a partner to start with, whenever multiple people come and train with me, what I tend to find is that people will try and dual handle at the same time. So the dog won't sit and then suddenly somebody just over their shoulder will go sit. And then the dog might sit. And then what you've got is you've got an issue with the person who is actually handling that dog at that time has had a dog ignore them. Then the second person's jumped in, given the command again, and then rewarded that dog. You've almost rewarded that dog for ignoring the person who initially gave the command. So whenever I teach two people handling the same dog, I tell them to, one, completely step back. So there's only one person handling at a time. So it's very clear to the dog who's handling them. And then make it very clear that you're swapping over as well. So then the person that was handling completely steps back and the other person kind of steps in. And you almost have to really kind of create that out on walks as well. So that you're not dual handling the dog at the same time, because it just causes confusion, even if you are using the same commands.
Also, you do get situations, and I've seen this with clients quite regularly, especially when a couple come along to train one dog, and you might find that one of them starts criticising the other handler for their handling, or saying, Claire, can you have a word with them, please? Because at home they do this. I'm not a marriage counsellor. I'm not going to get involved in that kind of stuff. And so they have to have really clear boundaries, between themselves, as to what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, and have constructive ways of perhaps communicating between each other so that they're not falling out over it or criticising one another over it.
I think we see a lot of this in our dog index, where it can definitely affect you as a handler's confidence, especially if your partner's been handling dogs longer, or they think that to do it a different way was better. That sort of bombardment can make you lose confidence in your own ability to control the dog, can't it?
Yeah, and I think obviously to handle a dog correctly, you need that confidence, but you also need the confidence of the rest of the family supporting you as well, and you then supporting them in turn as well. So I always say to people that have either got families or partners, bring them with you, because everybody needs to learn. Because as we spoke in the last podcast about poisoning cues, if people are using different commands or not necessarily the same body language and things like that, confusing for the dog. But equally, there needs to be some kind of rules and boundaries that I am very clear to explain in those classes as well. It is one person in front of that dog at a time. Nobody else jumps in. Whether that person's wrong or right at that point, that's down to me as the trainer to correct them, not the rest of the family, and then swap over.
Do you think as well, though, obviously this is a conversation you sometimes see, should a dog only ever have one handler?
That is a really, really difficult question. Yes, I think yes. Personally, I think a working dog that has a job role to do, that you do want to take quite seriously and to a high standard, whether that's to get them onto shoots or competitions or anything, they will work better for a single person, because that person has obviously been the person that's gone through that journey with them and taught them those commands. That doesn't mean to say that dog should then be completely ignorant to everybody else in the house. So to me, me and my husband have got a range of dogs, and they are kind of mine and his. But I would expect to be able to get any of his dogs out of the kennel and them not barge me out the way, them walk at heel if I ask them to, them retrieve if I needed them to, them hunt if I needed them to, and to just have their basic obedience commands as well as their manners. So I should be able to, if something happened to Tom, I should be able to handle his dogs as normal, but I might not get the same outcome level on a shoot day, let's say, if I worked them.
I agree with what Em just said, and I think it also depends on the level and experience of the dog. So Indy, the eldest of our 3 dogs, she will work for either John or I very happily, but she's a very established dog. She is primarily my dog without a doubt, but she understands everything well enough that she can work for John and will work for John. When I worked Dude 2 seasons ago, I picked up with Dude, which is John's dog. He had his first day shooting, and that that showed me how this can be an issue, because although Dude will work for me and does work for me, because John was out the front with a gun, Dude was very much like, where am I taking the bird then? My dad's down there with the gun, you're up there. After he'd done a couple of retrieves, he was absolutely fine, but it was, to be honest, it was something we hadn't really prepared Dude for. Rose is very young and immature, and quite honestly, she's just my dog at the minute. She really doesn't listen to John in training. In the house, she's obedient for him, but when she gets out to train, she hasn't really done anything with John, so she's all like, you know, I work for my mum. So I think it does depend also on the dog, their experience, and what you've prepared them for.
Yeah, and when I took on my late cocker from my husband, he started out as my husband's dog, and he was so well bonded to my husband. He'd had him from 8 weeks old to 6 months old, that the cocker, if I took him out, he would come with me. He would do everything I asked of him, and we were going through the training and sort of bonding ourselves. But if I walked into the yard and my husband was there, that was it. The cocker would fly back over to his side and say, well, this is my dad. And I'd say it easily took 6 months of me being the only person working with that cocker before he switched allegiance and became my dog. And from there on in, he was easily my dog of a lifetime. But it took that time period for him to realise he was no longer my husband's dog. He was now my dog.
So we're talking there about like the problems you can have between sort of partners or husbands, etc. What happens when like there's other family members? Like if you go from a couple to then introducing a baby, there's a pregnancy. What happens with working dogs there?
Well, for someone that is pregnant right now, due in a week and a bit, I've been just very aware that the majority of my gun dogs in my kennels that need to work for me will have to do this shoot season more than likely with a baby attached to me. Not only that, obviously that baby's going to be around 24/7 to any dogs that are in the house. So I've been basically prepping them and retraining them different things. So to be really, really kind of quick about how I explain it, I've basically been playing baby noises. The indoor dogs have had access to anything new that's come into the house and gone up. So they've been allowed to go into the nursery and sniff around and things like that. They've been allowed to sniff the Moses basket downstairs. They've got used to baby noises being played around the house. I've turned on all of like the instant prep machines and the sterilizers and stuff, just in case they make weird beepy noises or buzzing or anything like that, just so that my house dogs are used to the kind of common noises that are about to happen. Remember that dogs learn predominantly through sense of smell and hearing. So noises and smell is going to be the biggest thing. So when I do go into the hospital, Tom will then come home and introduce the baby's scent to the dogs as well when he comes home, obviously before I come home. With regards to the training, I have been, just in case I need to, I've been walking the dogs with a buggy so that they get used to walking next to a buggy. I've also been wearing the baby carrier out with a teddy bear in it so that they get used to coming into like recall positions with something like in front of me that might necessarily be blocking some of my body language. And I've taught them to retrieve to a slightly different position, which has got easier as I've obviously got bigger because there's a bump in the way. But mine used to come right in and kind of present upwards, sort of right against my legs, which has not been a possible position. And it definitely won't be with a baby in a carrier. So I've taught them to now retrieve to the side of me, so that I can take that retrieve off them safely without kind of throwing a child at them and into their face.
I think you also need to there's a balance when you add either a partner or a family member. As children get older, they want to do stuff with the dog, they want to be involved, so you need to find the consistency and try and put sort of the children on the same path that you are, but also find ways of making it fun for the child, the youngster involved, so that you're not constantly stood there going, no, don't do that, no, you can't do that, no, don't allow it to do that, no, don't play tug of war, no, don't throw that and let it run in. You need to find a way that, when my son was younger, there were 3 of our dogs that were far enough along in their training that I knew if he just threw unsteady retrieve after unsteady retrieve for them, they were all, the 3 dogs and my son, having a whale of a time. They all felt involved, they all felt equal. And then as he got older again, we could progress it to, right, now take this one dog. Now what I need you to ask it to do is sit and, try and wait or not let it go until you've sent it. So we're giving the child the responsibility, the feeling that, wow, I've done this just like mummy or daddy are doing it, but also within our boundaries, so that it's not then detrimental to our working dogs training.
Okay, so that's brings in some really good points. So, Claire, you work quite regularly with families and couples, etc. You've talked a little bit about that, who been stepping in when they shouldn't. Do you have cases where you are teaching the children as much as you're teaching the adults?
Yeah, I have quite a lot of people come and train with me, and they will actually ask, can the children be part of the training? Or they've essentially said that the dog is for the children. And I really welcome that. And I know Emma's done this as well. And I've done a couple now where I've done children's education days and little children's handling groups and things like that. But I think it's really good to include the children. You see so much negativity on social media about children climbing over dogs inappropriately, pulling their ears. If the children haven't been educated on how to behave and how to treat the dog, there's no surprise this sort of thing is happening. So I think as trainers, we have to embrace an element of helping educate the parents of the children on how to educate the children, but also take a hand in actually educating children on how they should behave and get them working with the dogs as well, if that's what the family wants, because we can help prevent these problems occurring and these incidents and accidents and children bite cases happening if we're educating.
Yeah, and I think that's a really valid point, Claire, because you see a lot of the rescues now that won't rehome to homes that have got under 5s. And we're not talking about older rescue dogs, we're talking about puppies that haven't got issues yet. So I think the onus needs to be put back on the parents to actually teach children how to behave around dogs and not vice versa. And like you, we've got a couple of kids that come to our group training, and I think they actually listen and pay far more attention than the adults do. They take it all on board and do it exactly as you've said. And it was really nice. I saw a little girl who's only about 7 walking down the road the other day doing perfect loose lead heel work.
I think what I found with kids as well is when we've taught kids actually and made the parents step back and the kids have actually completely taken a handle. Obviously, they need to be of a certain age where they can understand what you're asking of them and actually have a control of that dog, obviously, in a group class. But when I have taught kids, what I've found is, and again, this goes back to the cues podcast as well, is the fact that kids are very, very literal. So you give them, right, this is what you're going to do, this is when you're going to praise, and this is what the dog will look like. They can process that and they don't actually think about, oh, well, what happens if this happens? Or what happens if this happens? All they do is go, right, I've asked the dog to sit, I've put my hand up, the dog sat down, I give them a treat. And they can literally just kind of almost compartmentalize the journey that it should be doing, which actually makes them better at cueing, better at rewarding, And then the dog actually learns and gets better behavior much, much quicker as well, because the kids are very quick, because they kind of go, oh my God, they have a party, because the dog does what they've asked them to do straight away, which then to the dog goes, oh, I'll repeat that again because they had a party last time I did that. So I'll just repeat the behavior again. So you can actually get that muscle memory much, much quicker when you have a child teaching versus sometimes an adult.
That's absolutely right. And very recently in one of our puppy classes, we actually had an adult, the parent was struggling to grasp the concept of how we were training a puppy to leave something on the floor. And the child got it straight away. The child got it and actually demoed it to the parent. This is what she means, Mum. And the puppy then got it instantly. For the rest of that puppy course, we had the child doing the leave exercise the entire way through. And it was just incredible to see. And I think, it also really, I think it's really bonding for the child and the parent as well, because it's something that they're actually doing together.
I think what I also find is that a lot of parents come to me going, we don't want the dog to think of them as below the hierarchy and things like that. That's one thing that I get a lot, that parents think that if their children don't get involved, their dogs are just going to be completely rude to the children and jump all over them and harass them and not listen to them. So, which actually necessarily isn't the case. It's just us actually needing to educate the child in things that, like what Sam was saying, appropriate tasks and exercises for the dog's age, but also the child's age. If you've got very, very young kids, you can do things like throwing a ball and things like that, or you can get them to scatter feed. That's a great thing because hands are out the way. You've not got puppies nipping at them and stuff like that. Throwing food on the floor and things like that, and teaching them to a command and stuff is what I tend to do with much, much younger children. And then when the child can understand some of the boundaries that we're putting in place, you then can put some more rules in. Right, now you're going to make them sit and wait and you're going to put their food down and things like that.
You can also use it to your child's advantage as well in other ways. When lockdown was here last year, our daughter had not long started her first year at school, and all of a sudden was at home having to homeschool, and I still had to work going out training the dogs. So the children came with me for a portion of the day. And I wrote letters on the dummies, and I was working on the dog's steadiness, but also the daughter's reading and recognizing letters at the same time. I would stand sort of between the dog and the daughter with a pile of dummies at her feet and say, right, find me the one with the S on it and throw that. And then I could send the dog out for the retrieve and it would come back to me. And then I would say to the daughter, right, now find one with the letter A on it and throw that one as far as you can. So she was actively involved at the same time as me working on my dog's training. So it does become all encompassing and can help both ways.
That's an amazing way of like I said, combining families, and talked about when they're young. As teenagers become teenagers, their interest sometimes in dogs, and not their behaviour, but they're more emotional around the house anyway. Should we take or bear in mind how the dog's going to deal with that? Because we've talked, about how they read our body language, how they can understand what's going on, how they use scent, all those things. And then we have teenagers going through a really difficult part of their life, got normally sometimes no interest in the dog, or the dog becomes their best friend. Is there stuff we can do when our dogs are around teenagers to help all that be a little bit easier for the dog to understand?
I think when we get to teenagers, obviously they you have different hormones and things that play a part in it as well, and that I would say it depends on the teenager that you're dealing with. I wouldn't ever force a teenager to get involved if they really didn't want to, because the dog will pick up that this person doesn't want to be handling me and either kind of maybe not listen to them as well, or completely ignore them altogether, or decide that actually that person resents them and vice versa. So I think I'd never force a teenager to do it. If they wanted nothing to do with the dog, then I wouldn't force it. And if they wanted loads to do with the dog, they're of an age and an understanding where they can actually progress and be quite a good handler, because they've still kind of got that childlike behaviour that I was saying, where they're very literal and can compartmentalize exercises. But they can also, they've got the understanding of kind of what it should look like and where it should be going as a working dog. So they're much more likely to be able to cope for a full day on a shoot day, so they can come and get involved in that. and they can start to actually work that dog up towards something. I know loads of places that will do like children's working tests and stuff like that, where it's obviously very, very strict handling, all the way through to like actually working them on shoot days as well. So I just wouldn't ever force it.
I think that's a really good point, and dogs are very sensitive and pick up on emotions of children and of adults as well. But then I think you also have to think, look at what some of the incredible work that dogs are doing with young offenders and things like that at the moment. You know, that just popped into my head when Em was speaking then. And you've really got to, you know, appreciate how incredible dogs are, really, because of what they do and the way they can help people.
I think that's what you're saying, Claire, about the young offenders. They can build up this connection with a dog, and then that dog's not condemning them or judging them or trying to control them or give them authority. The dog's just the dog who wants to be with them regardless of what they're wearing, what they're doing, etc. So I think I think teenagers and dogs are actually quite a good thing if you can get them to connect.
Definitely.
Mind you, my dog that won't leave my side, won't look at anyone else, won't do anything for anyone else. Last year on a shoot, picked up a bird. It was William's first day out with me. And Zip went out, picked up the bird, absolutely fine, took it back to William. I could have swapped them both.
We've had 2 dogs. Mel went to Charlotte. When Charlotte started picking up, Mel became, even though she'd been Dad's dog like all her life, she became Charlotte's dog. And then Charlotte, wherever Charlotte went, Mel decided she was going with her. My dad might as well not have been there. And Grace, even when Dad was alive, Grace would work for Meg. So Meg at the time must have been about 6 or 7. She started working at, and because Grace knew her job, she built Meg's confidence, because Meg would be like, "Get out," and like pointing in a million directions, but Grace was like, "Okay, I know what that means." Do you know what I mean? And it was so much fun.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely a sport that when you handle all the pieces, it's something the whole family can do, and there's not many things or activities that a whole family can do at different ages and all enjoy.
I'll often ask if I get someone come with their dog, or they bring their partner, or they mention children, and I'll say to them, okay, so what is the deal? Is it going to be, you know, the children take the dog beating while Daddy stood on peg, or how is this going to work? Because then we can work out your plan, and we can almost have different training exercises and different games. You know, the children do that with the dog, and the dad does that with the dog, and the wife does that with the dog, and then they're each working towards their own goal for the multitasking dog.
And that must be really good, because then they all feel like they've got involvement in the dog, and not, you know, like our dogs, probably my thing is they're mum's dogs. They can also, it's a little bit different for those.
Yeah.
When they live in the house, we wouldn't be able to have that. Everybody would need to be like involved.
On the same page. Yeah. Mind you, the dogs sometimes choose as well. Our old German Shepherd Cross Rottweiler, she would stick with the children, and she would choose to stay with the children, and she would be their protector. And, you know, she gave them confidence to be by themselves, to grow, and that they could manage their own situation. And no one ever asked her to stay with them. She just, you know, of the whole situation, she went, well, I can go with Mum and everyone else up there, or I can stay with these 2 small people and back them up if I need to. And she always chose the children.
To finish this, though, that's how dogs became, what's the word?
Domesticated?
Domesticated, isn't it? Dogs became domesticated through children, because the children used to play with the pups that had been born near villages. Those pups and those kids made friendships, and the pups stayed with the kids. So children domesticated dogs, not adults, from their relationship with them, which is fascinating, I think. Honestly, I read that as part of a course on dogs' behaviour. That's all for this week. We hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast, and we look forward to bringing you another episode next week. Bye for now.